Well, that's pretty unexpected breaking news on a night where Guardians fans may have had a little bit of nostalgia watching Francisco Lindor win a playoff game and win a playoff series for the New York Mets, thinking about the playoffs coming this weekend and all the good things that are going on in Cleveland with the ALDS coming up. And then bang, all of a sudden, multiple reports come out. Terry Francona is back in the dugout. Brendan Gulick, Tommy Wild with you, part of our coverage on Cleveland Guardians on SI. I got to be honest, Tommy, gut reaction. I'm surprised. I'm not completely shocked that this is happening. There's a part of me that says, you know what? Tito is as much a baseball lifer, I mean, to his very core, as anybody you're ever going to meet in the game. And for me, it was all about his health. And if he's healthy and he feels like he can go contribute, we'll play in a minute what he said last year when he was leaving Cleveland. He certainly didn't expect to be managing again, but there is a little part of me that's not completely stunned that he's going to be back in the dugout in Cincinnati.
No, I think there's definitely two, reactions to have. There's the MLB fan reaction and also the Guardians reaction. The MLB fan reaction is obviously, I think that Major League Baseball, Terry Francona as a manager is just a better sport and a better game in general.
Sure.
The Guardians aspect of it is definitely a little shocked with how last year ended, with how that press conference went, and kind of the future of what Terry Francona, what his life would be like outside of baseball, is a phrase that Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff repeatedly said in those final few weeks. So to kind of all of a sudden see him back in the game, like you said, it's a little bit surprising from the Guardians perspective, but from an MLB perspective, it's kind of cool to see him already back.
And listen, no ill will whatsoever. Wish him well. There's a part of me that, feels like, gosh, you have a guy who is, I mean, let's just call it for what it is. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's 13th on Major League Baseball's all-time wins list with 1,950 wins. And I am 99% sure that the 12 guys on that list in front of him are all in the Hall of Fame. Tito's going to go to the Hall of Fame. He was the manager that broke the curse in Boston. This just it just feels weird. And maybe it would sit a little more heavily, a little more in a disappointing way if the Guardians weren't finding success immediately upon his leaving the franchise. But the fact that Cleveland's got a good thing going right now with Stephen Vogt, number 2 seed in the American League playoffs, and have home field advantage here this ALDS with Detroit coming to town. I guess there's a part of me that, as a Guardians fan, you sit there and say, hey, wow, okay, well, we're still in a good spot, right? And wish him well moving forward.
No, absolutely. If this was a season where the Guardians won, 70 games, it's 60 games, and we're not even close to the playoffs, and then all, like some people expected from them back in the spring, and all of a sudden the manager that, you had been your leader for 10 years retires and then comes out of retirement not even a year later, definitely would have been a different feeling. But the fact the Guardians just won 92 games, this is a shock because they're preparing to host the ALDS on Saturday. Definitely, like you said, makes it not as heavy that he's already back in the sport. I do think, though, like all of a sudden our gut reaction, like Reds, like that seems kind of like a surprise, organization for him to be joining. But if you think about it, Terry Francona is a Hall of Fame manager, like you said, for a couple of reasons. And one of those is that he's the perfect manager for a team that's looking to win now, like he was with the Red Sox. He's also a great manager for a team that's in a rebuild, still going through player development, like the Indians, as they were called, were when they hired him in 2013. And he kind of grew with that team to be that championship and World Series contender. And, the Reds are in a very similar situation, I think, to what the Indians were back in 2013, 2014 with, you can start to see some of these prospects start to come up. You have Ellie De La Cruz is the big one. Some pretty good pitchers like Hunter Green in there as well. I do think that it's not a totally shocking place for him to end up. And I do think he might do very well there, like he had been with Cleveland for all those years.
For me, more than anything else, Tito's a culture guy.
Mm-hmm.
And in talking with guys in the clubhouse and with coaches along the way, the thing that he does best is communicate and create an environment for success. I'm not trying to say that David Bell didn't, or that Cincinnati has, totally lacked that for so long. I don't know that that's fair, but most of the time when you get rid of your skipper, it's because you're in dire straits. Things aren't good and you're looking for a reset. And a lot of times that involves the culture of your team, of your clubhouse. And Tito's the kind of guy that can get that thing back in a much better direction. Lots of numbers on Tito in a second here, but I want to play a clip that we pulled from literally 1 year ago today when he was having essentially his like exit press conference in Cleveland, where he and Chris Antonetti sat and met with the media. Tito admitted he didn't think he was going to manage again and had a couple of things to say. So we want to play that for you here.
I never was real concerned about the word retire, because I guess when you say retire, it's like, well, you're going home and not doing anything. I know I need to go home and get healthy and see what I miss about our game. And then maybe, after some time, see the best way to maybe quench that appetite, whatever it is. I don't foresee managing. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. Nobody does. Because if I was going to manage, I like doing it here. But I also don't want to just turn away from the game. Don't feel that way either. So we'll kind of see. And Chris and Cherney and the guys, they've been so good about this. We'll figure something out that makes sense. But until you know what it is, I just need some time.
And look, I mean, I thought that was totally fair, coming at a time in his life where he needed to prioritize his health.
Yeah, absolutely.
The last couple of years had been really rocky and being in and out of the dugout, in and out of surgeries. And like some of it wasn't even just, physical walking around stuff. I mean, some of it was digestional, and it was like hard for him to live his life. I remember being told that, spring training last year was really, really hard on him. And, maybe he just needed the year to get himself straight. And the couple people that I've talked to, and I know you heard from somebody too, the Reds wanted him from the get-go. I mean, literally, like somebody that I'm pretty close to that is tied in with the Reds said literally the day that David Bell was told he's no longer required to lead the Reds, their top target was Terry Francona. And while the team hasn't confirmed this yet, I guess we should say before we go any further that Mark Feinzan from MLB.com, I'm pretty sure was first to report this, although lots of national reporters have been on it now. But, the Reds went out and basically said, listen, we need to hit the reset button. And there's a future Hall of Famer who is suddenly healthy, and maybe we can convince him to come back. And whatever Cincinnati said, in their meetings as a front office staff trying to convince Tito to come out, you just heard Tito say it. He was really careful during that whole lead up toward the end of his time in Cleveland not to use the word retire. Because I just think there was probably a little piece of him that said I'm not sure I'm totally done, but I can't keep doing this now.
Yeah, and I even remember when that initial pregame kind of media availability back, and I think it was the end of August of last year, where no one really knew it was coming, and he just kind of started talking about what that life after baseball kind of looked like, and it kind of shocked everyone. Like, I can't believe he's talking about this. He never ever wanted to use that word retire. And maybe in the future, like now we know that maybe he viewed this as possibly a time to come back. And I do think it's interesting because he kind of said in there, like he likes managing the Guardians and everything. And I almost wonder if he's kind of looking on the Guardians franchise. And I know that Stephen Vogt had said at the beginning that he had briefly talked with Francona a few times. You almost wonder like if he felt at peace knowing that Vogt is leading this team in the right direction, knowing that they're in the playoffs, knowing that they have this fantastic future, that he wouldn't feel this sort of guilt or anything immediately coming back and managing if the Guardians were in a different position. Again, that's totally speculation, but it is an interesting thought to have because we know how much he enjoyed managing this team. We know how much he enjoyed the city of Cleveland. So part of me feels like that could possibly be in there a little bit, but again, that's just a little bit of speculation on my part.
No, listen, I think you might be onto something. I mean, the fan bases in Philadelphia and Boston are passionate, but they're tough. And there's a different level of challenge in those markets, because it gets really loud when things aren't going perfect. And obviously, he was the manager that broke the curse, right? I mean, there was something to, the high highs and the low lows, right? And obviously it didn't go the way he wanted to, I would imagine, when he left Boston. But I got the impression that the marriage of Terry Francona and the Cleveland baseball franchise at the right time said, we need you and you need us, and let's start something really special together. And it turned into an amazing run for both sides. And maybe there is a little bit of that, like, hey, I can be at peace with, I did a great job here. Had some coaches that have left. I'll tell you, one that comes to mind is Brian Sweeney, who's the pitching coach for the Kansas City Royals right now. Brian told me regularly that his most important lesson he ever learned from Tito was how to communicate with the staff. And look at Kansas City. They just won a playoff series, for the first time in basically a decade now, and they're in the thick of it. And Guardians fans are hoping like crazy the Royals can knock out the Yankees.
Absolutely.
That'd be great. But in the meantime, to your point, I think there might be something to that of, hey, I can really, truly mentally close the chapter on that part of my life because I did everything I could to leave it in the right spot. And in the first go round without me, moving forward in a great direction. And Stephen Boat's done an incredible job. So yeah, I agree. There might be something to that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when the team was celebrating their first original postseason berth, and also obviously winning the AL Central, you could still tell that there definitely was like those echoes and everything of, this was the franchise that Francona helped build before we even knew that he'd be back in the game of baseball. So I do think there's that level of appreciation from, the franchise, the players, and everybody else there as well, that, this was something that he had a hand in this season, even though he may have not have been here.
Just going to wrap this up with a couple of highlights, news and notes on Tito and his time in Cleveland. Obviously, he's the all-time winningest manager in Cleveland baseball history. 921 wins, 757 in the loss column. Obviously, leading the Indians and Guardians from 2013 to 2023. For what it's worth, during that time frame, Cleveland had the fourth best win percentage in all of Major League Baseball, very closely behind the Dodgers, Yankees, and Astros. 6 postseason berths for Cleveland in that 11-year run. And Tito, 13th all-time on Major League Baseball's managerial wins list. If he wins 50 games, he'll get to 2,000. And all 12 ahead of him on the list have won at least 2,000 games. He's also third. He's tied for third in Major League history with most consecutive winning seasons from 2004 to 2000. 16 consecutive winning seasons. Only Joe McCarthy and Sparky Anderson won more. Obviously was with Philadelphia and with Boston. A couple World Series, 3-time AL Manager of the Year. All of those were in Cleveland. It's been a remarkable run for Tito. And while he was managing Cleveland, no other manager found more success with his respective club than Francona did in Cleveland. So wish him well, and hope the Reds win every game except for when they're playing Cleveland.
That Ohio Cup next year is going to be interesting. The storylines that are building in the Ohio Cup for 2025.
Feel the tension.
Oh, it's going to be real.
Oh, it's going to be fun. Yeah, and actually, come to think of it, I'm pretty sure, if memory serves me correct, last year in his last game, didn't we play Cincinnati? I think the Reds were here.
Yes.
And the Guardians won.
Last home series.
Well, I guess it's safe to close his home tenure.
Yep. And then they went up to Detroit to close out the series. Right. And that's who we're playing on Saturday. So make sure you tune into si.com/Guardians for all the latest coming up on the ALDS preview and coverage, because that certainly is going to be an exciting couple of weeks in Cleveland as well.
What a great tease. I love it.
I know, right?
Francona coverage coming and lots of playoff baseball coverage coming down the way. Certainly would appreciate if you subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Would certainly love to do more content just like this. You can find us on YouTube, Cleveland Baseball, or I should say Cleveland Guardians on SI, formerly Cleveland Baseball Insider. For Tommy Wild and Brendan Gulick, congratulations, Terry Francona, back in the dugout, going down to Cincinnati.